So, Asha, what is the Trump administration's strategy to distract the public from his involvement in the Epstein saga?
Yeah, it's complicated. I'm Asha and Renato. I teach national security law at Yale University. I'm a former FBI special agent, and I'm a legal and national security analyst.
And I'm Renato Mariotti. I'm a former federal prosecutor, a practicing lawyer, and a legal analyst.
And we're here to help you understand topics that can't be boiled down into a soundbite or a scheme. So what are we in week 5 of Ghislane Gate?
Well, it's the Epstein saga. It's been interesting to see. I mean, I was seeing some reports maybe earlier today, Asha, that the entire administration team is coming together. Like they're kind of huddling together. The attorney general and the director of national intelligence. Everyone's huddling together to figure out how do we handle this Epstein problem. It's like the biggest crisis of the Trump presidency.
Yeah, apparently Vice President J.D. Vance is having a strategy session at his residence.
Well, there you go. I mean, there's the
or should we say a strategery session?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, it's funny in a way, but it's serious stuff that essentially there is, I would say, a disinformation and public manipulation campaign aimed to try to convince Trump supporters that up is down and left is right. It's very 1984. Like we've always been at war with East Asia sort of thing, where he campaigned on, we got to open the Epstein files. All the Democrats are going to be there. He finds out his name's in the Epstein files. And there's this whole elaborate plan to, first we'll release the transcripts. You and I talked about that, which of course isn't going to have his name in it. Then it's, okay, now we're going to interview Ghislane Maxwell and we're going to release the recording of that. And then maybe that'll sound sound too chummy with Ghislane Maxwell, too friendly with her. So now they're talking the transcript is what I've heard. They're the transcript. But we're going to talk, I think, later today about maybe distractions that the Trump administration is trying. It's really like a whole grand strategy to try to turn millions of people's gaze away from the obvious in front of them, which is that Trump was very close friends and associates with Jeffrey Epstein.
So I know I point this out literally every week that we talk about this, but you said, and then he finds out that his name is in the Epstein files. How could he not know that? How could he not know that? He knew that. He had to know that. So this is so dumb. And I think it gets to me, the $1 million question, which is, we had one of these with the classified documents at Mar-a-Lago, the question that never got answered, which was, why did he take hundreds of classified documents and stick them in his storage room and bathroom at Mar-a-Lago? We never found out. It sounds like maybe Jack Smith had a motive, but we never knew. And I feel like we have a similar question here, which is why I just don't believe that he didn't know that his name was going to be in there. And even if it is it's his DOJ, he could easily redact his name, release it. There is something there. What is he hiding is to me the $1 million question. And I don't think it's simply the fact that his name is mentioned in there. It's something, I have been wondering whether he's getting pressure from some other people who might be reluctant to be outed for whatever reason. But I just would to point out that the fact that it's now at a level where the vice president is having a strategy session with all the cabinet officials on how to deal with this, for the love of God, man, just release the files. If you can't do that, then there's got to be something big. And it kind of then brings us to, one of the avenues that they are trying out here, which is to make Ghislane Maxwell herself some kind of decoy.
Yeah, well, I think she's actually, I would not even call her a decoy. She's supposed to be like Pontius Pilate. Like she's going to like wash her hands, like this is, like wash her hands of all this. It's sort of, I'm going to bless that. I'm going to say, I have nothing to do with this. Or the Pope blesses, waves his hands or something. Like she's going to say, oh, I didn't see Trump molesting anybody. I didn't see Trump hunched over underage, minors, whatever, girls. That's what I think that she's there to do, to say, well, you don't need to see the files because I, convicted criminal, am going to
convicted felon
yeah.
who was personally involved in the recruitment and sexual abuse of hundreds, maybe thousands of girls. I'm telling you, and you should trust me. Oh, and by the way, I was also charged with perjury twice.
Oh, yeah. And I have every incentive to lie because literally I'm spending decades in prison, and these are the only people who can change that or have anything to do with that, right?
So, yes. Yeah. And by the way, I got moved to a minimum security prison after I had my interview where I said that Trump had nothing to do with this.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So we are back to this weird interview that Todd Blanche did, maybe in his capacity as a deputy attorney general, maybe in his capacity as personal attorney. Is there a difference anymore? We don't know. But you were going to say something.
I was going to say, I think there's been memos circulating the Justice Department that everyone at the Justice Department has to advance the president's personal views, seems like.
Right. So they met, and as I have pointed out in many different venues, it's not clear to me that there was any witness there from the Department of Justice. Are you aware of, was there someone else from DOJ there? Were there any FBI agents? Was anyone who's familiar with the actual case that was prosecuted against Maxwell?
We don't know. No one knows for sure. It's all secretive, like what the circumstances were. I suspect there was. I'm going to kind of give you my theory of how it all went down.
Okay.
Maxwell's got a great attorney, well-known criminal defense attorney.
Who's pals with Todd Blanche.
Mm-hmm. And I presume, in fact, I remember having conversations with him online during the early days of the Mueller investigation where he was trying to side with Alan Dershowitz on some things. But in any event, he cannot break a proffer of what he thinks his client's going to say, right? He has privileged conversations with this client, has, kind of interviews her and says, look, here's what she's able to say that's helpful to you. They know exactly what questions, therefore they can go and have their recording and know exactly what questions to ask and know exactly what answers they're going to give. Mm-hmm. And if there are landmines there, like don't ask her about this, don't ask her about what she heard from others, just ask her about what she saw or whatever. They will know kind of how to steer those questions to generate a script that they can release that will, quote unquote, exonerate Trump.
Correct.
Yeah, correct. That's how it happened.
And that will point the finger at other people, probably. I imagine there was that too. And we're recording right now on social media. I just saw 30 minutes before we got on that ABC and I think MSNBC are reporting that a source reports that Maxwell said that she never saw Trump do anything wrong. This is why we're mentioning this. I'm sure this will be developed in the coming hours and days. But I would like to point out that is contrary to what many of the victims have themselves said in terms of Trump's anything from his presence to his involvement. I mean, I think he has been directly accused even by some victims. And so where I think this is going, Renato, I point that out to say, Trump is ultimately is all about loyalty tests. Loyalty tests for the people who work for him, loyalty tests for members of Congress, but also loyalty tests for his base. And I think we are very quickly barreling towards a loyalty test of who do you believe, Ghislane Maxwell or the victims? Like, I think this is heading towards a collision course with the victims, where they are the ones who are going to be ultimately discredited or vilified somehow. Because to pull this off, if this is what they want to do, if he wants to pardon her, I don't know what he plans to do. It involves making Maxwell into the victim.
Well, I don't think that it's going to be possible. Who knows? They're very good at.
They're already saying this on Newsmax. Haven't that they think
okay,
she got?
Sorry, I haven't not been watching Newsmax.
Yeah, well, so. I see the clips on Blue Sky, but that she, may not have been guilty of everything, and that she might have gotten railroaded, and then they have this convenient scapegoat, Maureen Comey, who, like her father, this is the narrative, is a rogue prosecutor who brought. I mean, are you really going to put it past them to do that?
No, I put nothing past them. It's just, it's such a hard turn. Like, they're trying to turn the Titanic here because they spent years steering everyone towards the Epstein files. Now they're like, don't be interested in the Epstein files. Be interested in these other shiny objects.
But that's the loyalty test.
Yeah.
That's the test of loyalty, right? This is Orwellian. This is, right before we came on, you were, quoting, we've always been at war with East Asia.
Right.
Or Eurasia, whatever. Right? That's what this is. And it's going to be, are you going to get on board or not? And I think it is ultimately going to be a test. Because if he can pull it off, if he can turn the Titanic around, it's over. I mean, then there is literally nothing that he could not make up, anyone that he can't make into an enemy, that his base will follow along with.
Yeah, I mean, that turning Maxwell into a victim is really something, given that she's, a heinous criminal.
What other justification would there be to pardon her? What is the basis for sending her to a minimum security prison?
My theory on that, here's my theory. I don't know about the minimum security. I think minimum security thing there, that's like they felt like they had to do it. But I was thinking that they were going to do a pardon bomb. This was my theory. They were going to pardon Diddy, pardon, whatever, pardon Diddy, pardon Maxwell, pardon everybody they can all at once. And like just create like so much news and so much hubbub that it's just you don't even think about Maxwell.
Pardon all the sex offenders at once. That's another strategy. So what do you mean they felt like they had to?
I think that they had to give her something in exchange for what she did. I mean, don't you think that she was induced in some way to have that interview? Of course.
But again, my point is that hasn't elicited outrage from his base.
No, I agree.
He's the person that they claim that they, that they hate. They want to go after pedophiles. She's a pedophile. She's a sex trafficker.
No, I hear you.
She was in jail. She is the worst of the worst in their own paradigm.
And, I'm not suggesting that these people are consistent.
I'm just saying that if they are okay with her being moved, that is, he's grooming his base to accept a narrative about her victimization.
Yeah, I will just say, I got to tell you,
words, they're going to turn against the victims.
Yeah, I guess. Look, I've never said that Trump's base is consistent. I don't think that they are. I think that it's one thing it's one thing for them to say, okay, we're moving her to a different prison, a nicer prison, because maybe we have to interview her more, or we want to give her, have access to interview her. It's another thing for them to say we're pardoning her. Yeah, it's a tough. I think
it is one step down the path, but anyway, we'll see. I mean, we'll see how this new news is taken, and I think that it is the first step to. It is first test, I guess, of whether his base will be like, oh, okay, I guess, Trump didn't do anything wrong. Though I guess in some ways it begs the question, if she's saying Trump didn't do anything wrong, then there should be nothing that he's afraid of to release those files. I guess logically it doesn't really help him, but I'm not sure his base is that logical.
It's really, I think it's all about having some sort of narrative so that they can move on to the next thing. That's what it's all about to them. So, Asha, speaking of narratives, so you can move on to the next thing, it's amazing how at the exact same time that the Epstein files, quote unquote, controversy and internal strategy discussions are happening, Tulsi Gabbard comes up with all sorts of evidence about something that supposedly happened 9 years ago.
Yes. So she has declassified documents relating to the quote unquote Russia hoax, which, spoiler, was not a hoax, to once again really try to revive the narrative that this was that the actual collusion was between Hillary Clinton. I'm not totally sure of exactly how this conspiracy theory fits together, but basically this is all the intel officials surrounding Obama, Clapper, Brennan, Comey, all of these people. And then also this idea that Hillary was the one feeding information to the FBI to get them to investigate Trump, et cetera. So she's involved in this also. Not for nothing, but there was a special counsel named John Durham who investigated this conspiracy for almost 4 years to a tune of, I believe, $9.5 million. I mean, this was an investigation that lasted longer than the Mueller investigation itself. And he brought 2 indictments that resulted in acquittals. They were indictments for false statements of people that he was trying to tie to this idea that, they were helping the Clinton campaign feed false information. It did not fly. He got 1 conviction of a lawyer who doctored an email, an FBI lawyer who doctored an email. He pleaded guilty. We knew that from the Mueller investigation already. That was no shocking surprise. And among the documents that she declassified, it turns out, I wrote about this for my Substack in my weekly roundup last weekend. It was an annex to the Durham report where the purported, emails that were tying or intelligence that was tying Hillary Clinton to the collusion was actually Russian disinformation. I mean, he actually uncovers this, and I guess it's buried in some kind of annex. So in other words, his own investigation not only didn't find evidence of the conspiracy, it debunked the conspiracy, but now, never wants to let actual facts get in the way of a good conspiracy and baseless investigation. It looks like Pam Bondi is allowing the Justice Department to begin an inquiry into certain unnamed officials from the Obama administration and to determine whether bringing evidence before a grand jury is warranted. So this is a pretty significant escalation.
It is, although it's interesting to me. It is part of the playbook that you and I have discussed many times, Asha. First of all, I would just say the Durham annex that you refer to, very important. If you go on X and look at what the right's talking about, they're all about the Durham annex this and the Durham annex that. The Durham report, 300 plus page report, as you point out, comes to all these conclusions that essentially there's nothing there. So they're sitting there and they're like, well, we're looking at the raw material, which we can manipulate or spin in some way that is different from what actually his investigation found. But, regarding what the Attorney General did, I think it's actually very interesting. When you look at it, what did she do? She, quote unquote, impaneled the grand jury to look into these issues. The grand jury's already there. Okay. It's not like there's some new grand jury set up. There's a standing grand jury. That's what they're using. That's what they're calling impaneling a grand jury. All that happened was they decided, okay, we're going to issue some subpoenas, or we're going to conduct some interviews. We're going to enter into a system that we're creating an investigation. The standard, as you know, Frasha, for that is very low. And there's no review. There's no third-party review of that. It's not like there's some judge who's like, oh, you're opening investigation. I approve that, right? There's no third party outside of the executive branch who makes an approval on that. It's Kash Patel's agency and Pam Bondi's agencies together, or Pam Bondi's DOJ is part of, the FBI is part of the DOJ. But the bottom line is they are making those determinations. Whether it turns into anything or not, they're, quote, investigating this issue. There's something to this, and this gives Fox News and Newsmax and all sorts of right-wing outlets tons to talk about. And if you look at the statistics, Asha, it's crazy. Some of the statistics out today, the interest on the right in the Epstein files is dramatically lower today than it was just a week ago because of this story. As this story's popularity rises, the popularity and the interest in the Epstein files goes right down.
Yeah, I think you're making a good point that it is about the optics. And we know that Trump really likes he just likes the appearance of people being investigated, which is why he hates being investigated, because he believes that that's like tantamount to being guilty, right? And so he totally took advantage of the Hillary Clinton email investigation during the 2016 campaign. In that perfect phone call, he wanted President Zelensky of Ukraine to go on CNN and announce an investigation. There was no actual work being done to, share evidence between the Department of Justice and Ukraine prosecutors to actually conduct the investigation. I don't think Trump really cared. He just wanted a third party to say that that Joe Biden and Hunter Biden were under investigation, because then he could kind of use that to his benefit through that campaign. And of course, that backfired on him. Of course, during, we had the special counsel into Hunter Biden and into Joe Biden for, having classified documents. And I think that was like a thing that they milked for all it was worth. And so I think you're right that just kind of saying that we're going to open this investigation. Here's what I'll say, though. And before we came on, you and I had a little exchange about this. I think this can potentially be more than just optics. Because I think that in the wake of the Supreme Court's immunity ruling, there is really nothing that stops Trump from ordering his Justice Department, his FBI, his intelligence agencies from fabricating evidence. This is what he did with Jeffrey Clark. He told Jeffrey Clark before the end of his last administration to generate letters making false claims of voter fraud in various states, including the state of Georgia, in order to get them to open an investigation into voter fraud, so he could substantiate his claim that the election, the 2020 election, was rigged. And the Supreme Court very clearly said, yeah, even if it's a sham investigation, or if it's an investigation taken for an improper purpose, the president's control over the Justice Department is a part of his exclusive and preclusive authority, where he cannot be held criminally liable or civilly liable. So I think that it's not just the optics. If he really wants to pursue this vendetta, he could generate false information that then could be presented to a grand jury that could actually result in charges. Now, it's unclear to me why this is happening in the Southern District of Florida, because the entire Russia investigation happened in Washington, D.C. I can think of one judge whose name rhymes with Bilene Blanton, and maybe they're hoping that will be somebody that is going to help them out or something. But I'm really curious about what you think about this, why this is being done in the Southern District of Florida. And I'm not really clear how the statute of limitations would even survive anything here, because as you mentioned, this is almost a decade ago, and most of the statutes of limitations for anything that could, and by the way, no crime actually was committed, and Obama has immunity under that same immunity decision. But of course, none of that actually kicks in until all of these officials would then, have to withstand all of this until they get a chance to go into court and ask for these charges to be dismissed, which is why I'm not talking about that right now.
Wow. All right. There's a lot to unpack here. I mean, I think that you and I, in many ways, Asha, are looking at this similarly, but just it's a matter of degree. But I think that, I guess here's my take on it, Asha. I think that it's very easy to do everything that they've done and more. Okay. Very easy to initiate a grand jury investigation. Very easy to interview people. They don't have to get anyone's authority to do it. They could just start interviewing people, and then that can leak, and they can keep news cycle after news cycle going. We've interviewed so-and-so. So-and-so's been hauled in front of the FBI, whatever it might be. They've been called in front of the grand jury. Yeah. And they can do all that, issue subpoenas, all that sort of stuff. They can do all that without any review, without anyone looking at it, without having any potential scandal from that. They're just looking at things. They're trying to determine what's what. So I think they can keep that going for a long time. It can generate many, many news cycles. I think once you go to court, you bring charges and you bring forth doctored evidence or whatever they might do, then suddenly there's like some third party who looks at it. Now, you may say, well, they're going to be in the Southern District of Florida. Yeah, I hear you on that. I actually think the reason they're doing it in the Southern District of Florida is because during the course of the grand jury investigation, there are times where you actually have to go to the judiciary to get something, whether it's immunity for a witness or to get, whatever, somebody's challenging a subpoena, trying to quash a subpoena, whatever it might be. Doing it in that venue means that they know where what judge is going to hear that versus, Merrill Powell or Beryl Powell or whatever, or Howell, in DC or whoever it was.
Boasberg.
Boasberg.
They are already lied to.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So they've got a lot of the judges in DC are not super enthusiastic about their sham investigation. So I think that's why they're doing it. And I guess from my perspective, like you said, I mean, there's all sorts of problems here. It's super old. Statute of limitations is going to be a major issue. There's going to be very few statutes that aren't going to be blown here, that aren't going to already be past. Statutes of limitations is what I'm referring to there. Statutes of limitations aren't going to be blown. There's this immunity problem they have to deal with. But that almost, like, to me, that almost weakens their hand to go there. Like, it's better to just have the never-ending investigation that just generates lots of headlines. Like they did with Durham. He went on for 3 years, and then he releases a report that says nothing's there. But these people don't even pay attention to that. Generated years of headlines and distraction, and they can have a new witness being subpoenaed whenever the Epstein story or something else comes into
I agree with you. I just do think that, Trump has a weird thing about Obama. And I think in other words, he wants other people to be similarly situated to him so that he can then downplay what happened to him. So I would personally not underestimate his desire, because he's not in the weeds like this. He's not as nuanced and strategic a thinker as what you're saying. Because you're right, this would be the smart way to do it. There are a lot of things that he's done so far. There are smarter ways to have done it than the way that he has done it. Okay. So, yes. But he may just want, in the core of his being, for Obama to be indicted for something, so that he's not the only, president since Nixon who's been indicted for a crime. I mean, I could totally see that. And I think he could say, I don't even care what happens later on, even if it gets thrown out because of immunity or whatever. I want, him to be charged with a crime. And, with some 10-count indictment or something. And, his Justice Department is going to be like, okay, we're going to do it.
I hear what you're saying. I mean, trying to predict what Trump's administration is going to do is very difficult. So I'm not going to claim that I have some knowledge of what they're going to do or not. He has moved his lips himself. Trump has said that this immunity decision benefits Obama. And I suspect that's because some lawyer, whether it's Pam Bondi or someone else, has told him, Todd Blanche or somebody, about this immunity decision also applies to Obama. But in any event, the bottom line is, whatever ends up coming of this, it's a huge distraction. It's false. It's misleading the public, and it's a deliberate deception of the public to try to distract them. It reminds me, of course, that movie Wag the Dog from many years ago, right? It's like, oh crap, there's a scandal. We've got to manufacture an international crisis. And this is similar, manufacturing a phony investigation, a sham investigation, in order to distract people from the Epstein files.
So, Renato, we have kind of an unusual episode because we usually do 2 segments before we chit chat. But this week has been a weird week with a lot of different kinds of news. And I know I have been getting a lot of calls since yesterday to talk about the governor of Texas seeking to arrest Democratic members of the state legislature, and also whether the FBI can assist in that effort, because apparently I think he's made a request of the FBI to come help arrest them.
So, yeah, just to step back here for a minute, if you have been burying your head in the sand, didn't know what was going on in the news this week, Trump called on Texas to redistrict to get rid of Democratic districts because he try to gerrymander their state even more. And they complied, and they actually had a plan to further gerrymander their state. I say further because Texas is one of the most gerrymandered states in the entire country by far. To further gerrymander their states and pick up 5 more seats because Trump is worried about losing the House in the midterms. So I will just say, Asha, just to give a sense of history, it's something I feel very personally about, that I was clerking on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals when the first round of gerrymandering by Texas Republicans took place. In fact, my judge was on the 3-judge panel that, because at the time we had a Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act that mattered. Voting Rights Act, I should say, that mattered in the South. That would actually have to review those maps and, created a judicially created map. But ultimately they succeeded. And in the past, what's happened is Democrats have tried, the only strategy they have there, because they're in their minority, is to try to flee the state to prevent there from being quorum in the state legislature. They've done it in the past. It hasn't worked for various reasons. This time, though, it's working quite well because my state's governor, J.B. Pritzker, has helped them with resources to kind of help this effort. So they're staying in Chicago area. They were in my county recently, all of them staying in, I think, a Hyatt, which is family owns. There's been some reports of threatened violence and this and that in our area. But the point is, they're all hanging out here in the Chicago area. And until they get back to Texas, there's no quorum. And so you can't redistrict those seats away. The reason that's why going to Illinois solves a problem is because the state of Texas doesn't have authority inside the borders of Illinois, which is why a reporter mentioned, to Trump, what about the FBI? And he's like, it's a great idea. And we should be doing that. So that, I think, is the context for that comment by Trump.
And just to rewind, this is not a typical time period where you do redistricting.
Absolutely not. There's a census every 10 years.
I was going to say, we're midway in a decade. This is not the time that this happens, right? So
correct.
There are, legal issues, but I guess, can Texas just do that? Or do they just do it and then it's sort of, easier to ask for forgiveness later from the courts or something like that, just to get it done and then let elections just happen based on that? And
the short answer is they can do it. The short answer is they can do it. And in fact, in that time that I mentioned, they did it. So back when I was clerking 0102, they came up with a map. Judges rewrote that map to preserve incumbents and make it more contiguous and so on. Then they, a year or two later, redid it again. And so they're very hyper aggressive redistrictors in Texas to gerrymander out Democrats. And this is essentially, after Trump's most recent election, how can we more radically redistrict? It's already a hyper gerrymandered state, and they're basically gerrymandering it to the hilt.
But 2 can play this game.
Indeed. And California is getting in the foray. So, California has like independent commissions that draw these, it's like citizen commissions and others that come together to draw these maps that are more neutral. They haven't been playing this game, but now there's increased energy in California to say, most of the big states are Democrat. So if you want to do this, you don't have mutual disarmament. If you guys are going to do this, then we'll do the same thing. And hopefully eventually people will start actually, supporting reform, because right now the Republicans are against redistricting reform.
I mean, it points out a very sad thing that we're in, right? Which is that, particularly at the state level, but in general, efforts to shore up democracy, put in guardrails to protect the integrity of the democratic process, results in an asymmetrical disadvantage with respect to states that don't really care. So it's, so California is kind of, they're sort of chumps, really, in a way. I mean, in the Trump era, to try to stick with norms and guardrails at a time when the opposition is willing to just steamroll over it and really transgress not just norms and guardrails, but literally transgress the law in many instances. It places, I think, us in a predicament. Do you fight fire with fire? Do you say that in the interest of preserving democracy, we have to play by the same playbook? Because I think that, I think this is true not just, with the states, but I think it was a very big missed opportunity during the Biden administration to just go, let's go back to democratic norms, like in the Justice Department, as opposed to being very aggressive about, overcorrecting.
Yeah, it's like a really big and interesting topic. And, first of all, I want to just say it's not just the Trump era. I hold the Supreme Court directly responsible for this, because this issue went up to the United States Supreme Court and they held that basically there's no review of political gerrymandering whatsoever. And that really created this monster, basically gave carte blanche to these folks. And that is, one of the most consequential decisions that they made, that and some of their campaign finance decisions, because those have such, and before that, Buckley versus Vallejo, that really had, the Supreme Court has had some very significant role in undermining our democracy. But putting that to the side, I think the broader issue you raised is so important, Asha, which is, so much in the era of Trump is figuring out ways, and the Republican Party more generally are figuring out ways to push on the norms and the expectations and the values that we have as a country. And I think on all sorts of fronts, Democrats are confronted with the choice you mentioned. Do we gerrymander if they're gerrymandering, as one example? You mentioned the issue with the Justice Department. I think there's no excuse for not exposing and looking at what the Trump administration was doing. But some will argue, that the Democrats should have done the same thing, right? Investigations, lobbying charges. I personally view that as an abuse of and unconstitutional in its own right. But there have been people arguing that we should. In fact, I saw an interview recently with Mehdi Hassan and Jon Stewart where they were basically arguing, for that, like we should, have the Justice Department weaponized, truly weaponized, as opposed to faux weaponized, the way that the Republicans were making these false charges. My point is, I think it's a bigger issue, and it's really an existential, as you put it, question for progressives.
Yeah. Well, aside from whether California or Illinois or any other blue state should try to play by the same playbook, there is this issue that you mentioned about whether the FBI should get involved. Now, the FBI is authorized to enforce federal criminal law and protect against threats to national security. They can and do come in and help local law enforcement when asked with criminal cases. So, you know, the John Benet Ramsey case. I think they didn't actually call in the FBI, and they probably should have. But there's a major case. They need a better forensic analysis, et cetera. They can call in the FBI to do that. It's not clear to me that this is a criminal violation for these lawmakers to flee the state. I mean, they're not fugitives of justice.
No, and I absolutely agree. And that is really, it's really would be an abuse here because there's no federal crime being committed at all. Now, what I think the state is going to do, in fact, there's already efforts underway, is they're going to be trying to claim that these state representatives have abandoned their offices and thus should be removed. There should be a special election to replace each of them. But they have to do that by filing suits in each and every county for each and every legislature individually, because they all have rights and due process and so forth. And then that's got to be, a lot of those judges are not going to be sympathetic to that. And so it's a long and arduous process. So I wonder if attendant to that, they're going to find some mechanism to get them back. But I don't think that this is something that's going to be solved for a long time, because it's apparent that they have virtually unlimited resources to stay in the Illinois, Chicago area as long as they want to. And they're using this to galvanize support for themselves. And candidly, their existence is also at risk because the Texas Republicans have gerrymandered the heck out of them too. And really the reason they're a rump minority there is because the state legislative and state Senate seats have also been gerrymandered. So in many ways, this is sort of Texas Democrats fighting for the existence and relevance of their own party.
Well, it is not clear to me. I mean, I think you and I agree that there is no basis for the FBI to get involved and to arrest these members because it sounds like even this abandonment thing, it would be a civil issue. It's not a criminal issue. So, but unfortunately, because we are now through the looking glass and it is Kash Patel's FBI, what if Kash Patel does order FBI agents to go arrest them? Or frankly, what if Kristi Noem tells ICE to go? I mean, I don't even know what's happening anymore. Like, it's not clear to me what would stop them from doing that and what recourse these legislators would have if federal agents wearing masks stormed the Hyatt and kicked down their doors and just arrested them and hauled them back into Texas. I mean, I'm just saying, like, what do you think could happen? Who would stop them?
Well, I don't think anyone would stop them necessarily. Well, it would be interesting. I don't think that local law enforcement here would stop them. I think it would become a national story, a national scandal. I think there might be Section 1983 suits, although the question is, what's the damage, right? What's the harm? We took you home to your... And
the administration seems really scared about that.
Yeah.
I mean, they're literally abducting people in plain sight. No,
I hear you. I'm not saying it's impossible. I think it's more likely than the indictment of Barack Obama. Let's put it that way. I think it's in the realm of possibility. Yeah, and I don't think it will happen today, but it could happen eventually, particularly if they can have some big distraction to take people's gaze away from it.
Well, that would definitely take the gaze away, and I don't think they particularly care about the rule of law. So, get the lawmakers back, distract from the news, get to vilify Democrats, and people get to see Democrats arrested. I mean, maybe it's not Hillary Clinton and, Clapper and Comey, but could be almost as delicious for the MAGAs.
Speaking of delicious, it's been delicious to see California Republicans co-sponsoring bills to get rid of gerrymandering in the House. And I think that, one thing I wonder is whether, people in the Republican Party fall over themselves when Trump suggests something or demands something. They did that here. But I wonder if there may be some disagreement within the Republican strategery group as to whether this actually makes sense. Because the redistricting plan that they've come up with in Texas is not foolproof. In fact, it's more risky. It gives them a chance of winning more seats, but they're not as guaranteed of seats. Mm-hmm. And they're going to then potentially lose seats in California and so on. Is this really the right path for them? They may just decide that, they can if they can distract Trump with something else, because I think there's an element of managing Trump that maybe they won't go through it, that they'll just use it as a story to attack Texas Democrats without actually going through with it.
Well, indicting Barack Obama would distract Trump.
I'll give you that.
So, Renato, I know that we talked about this last week, but I wanted to bring up again that you and I are doing a fun virtual happy hour next week to talk about our cruise to Alaska next summer.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting, and it's really, no pressure at all. You can come to our happy hour and just meet us and talk to us and hear what we have to say and see if you're interested in potentially spending some time getting to know us and seeing us in a environment where we can just chat openly about all sorts of topics and have fun together.
So there'll be agents from the travel agency on hand to answer logistical questions. But I think part of the reason that we wanted to do this was also to get feedback from interesting people on what they might want on a cruise, because it's a fairly small ship. So we have an opportunity to kind of shape it around some of the interests that people might have, in terms of discussions and stuff. So we kind of wanted to create a sense of community. That was your idea, actually. It was very good.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I really want it to be collaborative. I want to understand what people would like to do. I mean, obviously, look, cruising Alaska is fun. It's a great summertime activity. It's going to be beautiful and really, I think, an experience of a lifetime. But we're going to spend plenty of time in the ship. And part of the fun of this is going to be having community and talking together and having like more real lengthy conversations rather than just, sending skeets at each other online.
Yeah, I do monthly office hours on my Substack, and I know that just having time to just connect with people, for me, it's really good to know what people are thinking about. But also, I think that for my subscribers, it's good because we get a chance to really get in depth on stuff. So I think that will make the cruise very fun. In addition to, as you mentioned, being in Alaska and having great food from what you've told me about your previous Oceania cruise. So what we'll do is we're going to put a link to, this week we'll put a direct link to RSVP for the virtual happy hour in the show notes, and then also to the general information page. So you can check it out. And I think that they are giving some kind of cruise credit for people who book before August 22nd. And that information is all on the page. So,
yeah. And no commitment, just to show up. So why don't you come on the Zoom, meet us, talk to us, and potentially see what it might be like to have a fun experience along with a lot of other people who are interested in the same topics.
And it would give us a chance to just see who listens to our podcast and get to know you.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.